Hey guys, time for another episode of The Art of Making. Today's topic will be, we're going to cover a couple of different things on this one, but we're going to talk about widgets and what they call dribbles, meaning odds and ends, and waste molds, meaning, it's easier just to get right to it. There's my main product line, or your main sculpture or prop that you would make. A lot of the time you're going to have sometimes little bits of resin left over after you do your initial pour. So I like to keep what I call waste molds laying around the side always if there's a little too much resin, not enough resin. And what I do is I cast tiny little parts. Little bits of this, little bits of that, and after a while, you've got a drawer full of random little pieces. Like this, full of casted bolts, half round parts, and all kinds of bizarre shapes and knobs, gears, and vintage radio dials. So you just never know. If you're a builder like me, you just don't know when you're going to need a little detail part. So I'm always casting something. So I just did a casting a minute ago. I will be cracking that mold shortly. But this is a mold that I made a while back, and like I said, they're just little silicone. And what these are, if I peel it out, these are little horns. So every time I have some leftover resin, I just pour and I get myself these. There's like 3 different designs that I sculpted. There's another one. And this is actually a third, slightly different design. So here I can cast 3 different horns every time I have a tiny bit of resin. I just pour it, throw them in a drawer, something will come up and I'll need some horns. These were actually the horns that I sculpted when I did my Darth Maul skull. So these are actually based on the Darth Maul bones or thorny protrusions on his head, and they looked really good. And recently I had to do a music video where a client needed some horns attached to some barrettes, and I said, hey, I happen to have a mold already with some short horns. Client loved it, and good to go. Didn't even have to create a new sculpture, already had them on hand. So these will just, like I said, go in a drawer or a box where I keep spare parts. Here's another one, another mold. Let's see here. I'll grab this thing. It's one of those molds I never got a chance to trim or clean it up, but this is very odd looking elongated bolt. Don't mind the different colors because sometimes I just pour different resins at different times until the mold gets full. But again, it's a nice little detail part for a backpack or some component. Throw that in the box. Here's a little mold I picked up at Michael's that I had a little resin, poured it on top. And what it is, it's a little jewel mold, which are great. And now, like I said, just had a little bit of resin. Bam, so now I've got all kinds of little jewels, and they easily, you just easily peel them out, sand them, paint them. You can also do the clear casting. A lot of people make the jewelry for cosplays and other things, and there's a lot of clear cast resin products that this is specifically made for, or you can do, you know, the solid color resin and then paint them as you wish. All right, so these will get these aside. All right, that mold, that's these. This is another pair of molds that I keep in a tray, and every time I have a little resin, I'll pour it in. And then these are some old molds. They're kind of wearing out. It's probably time to make some new ones. You can see the rubber or silicone is really starting to get dry, which is why you have to constantly spray mold release to keep the surface moisturized. They will deteriorate with time. There is no way around it, but yeah, I've just popped out a small half skull. And again, it looks all multicolored because I'm always pouring resin. You don't have to pour the resin all in one pass. You can pour resin as you have it, so the mold can say half casted, but you can never have enough skulls. Sorry, for any kind of costume, anything, this will make a great belt buckle, a great emblem, great pieces for armor, even if you want to decorate a chair or something that you're working on. I do have another mold somewhere with the entire skull, which also needs to be updated because I've used these forever and they're starting to wear out. So now that we've covered these molds and pulling out, here's one here that I was actually working on, because you get to the point where you've used the same old stuff and it gets old. So I've already trimmed the mother mold previously, and I have yet to peel the silicone off of this. So as you can see, the reveal, we'll work our way around. Absolutely perfect. And what I've done is all kinds of random hardware, bolts, knobs, Allen head nuts, and everything. And if you have to go out and buy the hardware every time, it can get expensive. And then with the bolts, you have to cut the bolts off if you're going to add it to costuming. This way, this is my brand new waste mold. So now every time I have resin or just a few drops left over, I just pour it in here, and before you know it, you've got a drawer full of every kind of nut, bolt, rivet, and detail part that you can possibly want for accessorizing any project. So that's covered, that's covered. Here's another mold. She is really, really hot. The resin was getting a little bit old, so that the resin tends to absorb a little bit of moisture. Regardless of what people think, the resins and the silicones do have a shelf life. So you do need to be aware of it. As you're using your resin, you have to constantly keep it close, especially here in South Florida. It absorbs moisture, and moisture can be the kiss of death to your resins. Now, if you look carefully, you can see the resin actually raised. When I poured this was perfectly level to the surface. But because of all the microscopic air bubbles and particles that it absorbed out of the air, it actually rose quite a bit like a cake. And that in and of itself is not bad, but it can be problematic later when you're doing a cleanup. Now, so as I peel this piece out, the casting overall tends to come out very nice and clean, and I know it just looks like a hockey puck, but what this is, or will be, I will be doing another castings later, but this is the actual cork for my Harley Quinn pop guns. So then this part that has risen will be sanded flush, and this will be glued onto the end of the pop gun. Now, another big complicated thing. Normally I have little screws that run through it, but don't know where I haven't used this mold in a very long time. So I'm going to take all my clamps off. See, now that I've removed my clamps, like any other process, I have a pour spout where I use the funnel, and I poured my resin in this piece. I remove, as always, both halves of the mother mold. And now I have the thing, and she is quite hot. So let's see what we have. There we go. A beautiful casting. Let's see if we can get the lighting just right. A really, really nice revolver grip, trigger housing, pilette, and you can see how easy this came out of the mold. There's a little bit of flashing, and then there's some pieces here that need to be trimmed. The trigger, all of this in the trigger opening will get trimmed out, leaving the trigger. Like I said, remove the flashing. And then of course there's a bit of resin on the end that gets trimmed off and cleaned up. And then this is a beautiful, like I said, revolver grip, which will house the large cylinder for the Harley pop gun. And then this will be the cork on the end. And that'll be a later video where I'll be doing the painting and assembly on this particular prop. So there you have it for now. Just some basic mold well, not mold making this time, but mold castings, and allowing yourself, you know, for excess resin, so you don't waste any resin, basically. That's why I like having the waste molds and doing the casting. Excuse me, guys. So anyway, keep on making. Bye.